Assassin's Creed has been a franchise that has managed to crap out installments that are consistent in being a broken mess over the years. Regardless of the numerous amounts of glitches and bugs, the storylines that have no payoff, rinse and repeat mechanics, broken AIs, poorly animated characters, and cutscenes. To put it short, despite of its various flaws, the franchise still has a player base divided between people that are oblivious and those that just put up with what they get. Perhaps this stems from how good the original Assassin's Creed games were. In its inception, it was ahead of its time with unique storylines, characters that had great moral value, world building with historic resemblances, gameplay which involved parkour and stealth, and soundtracks that elevated the experience a player had. Over time, like any franchise though, it appears to have been milked to Valhalla itself by Ubisoft. Initially, I did fail to understand how a company of its caliber with so many talented employees can churn out something that appears to have no personal standards. Now that certain instances of the work culture has come to light, such as misconduct, abusive work environments, and complacency from the leaders within the company, all of which linking to one person, namely Haskovite, the sole person that controls whether a project gets greenlit or not. Considering that it is being acted upon and some of the key people have either resigned or have been fired, it does seem some initiative is being displayed by Ubisoft. Well, keeping that aside and moving on to the game itself, there have been users who have pointed out issues regarding inclusivity by implementing something that is not relevant in a time period or a specific culture. Inclusivity isn't completely wrong, and creative freedom allows this to be implemented in a very beautiful and skillful manner. However, it cannot be the only thing relevant to the character or a game, especially something like Assassin's Creed, where the games are set in specific time period, and even if they are part of the game, it should not be the only defining character trait. It should also reflect with the sentiments of that particular time period where the game is set in, at least for the most part. Personally though, this shouldn't be that much of an issue when the framework of the game itself is in shambles. Having to pay $60 for an experience that leaves a fading memory, if anything, is nothing but disappointing. All this being said though, moving on to the game, the question still remains: will Assassin's Creed Valhalla redeem itself by presenting an experience that is both memorable and fun, or will it be another reskinned version of Odyssey?
Here it comes!
What is that? What's going on?
This is the end, Desmond. Scheduled for deletion.
What are you doing?
What is a man but the sum of his memories? We are the stories we live, the tales we tell ourselves.
Don't do this!
I'm saving you, idiot! Go! Go!
Stories need characters that are grounded into the world and have drive within them. Characters are not just made alive with graphics. As much as facial animation does matter, it isn't the only thing contributing to making a great character. Characters can have a greater impact on the audience if the personalities are crafted with effort and care. Characters are defined by their actions, their behavior, their growth, and even demise thereof. To make a remarkable story, you need to have memorable characters. Subject 16 wasn't even a playable character, yet he has managed to leave a marking impression on so many people. Remember how killing or sparing your sibling in Odyssey, which mind you was supposed to be the end of the game, had no great impact whatsoever other than adding the sibling as a crew member in your ship and giving them some voice clips and presenting the player with a dinner cutscene where the dead meat in the table had more life than the characters themselves. Compare that to the determination of Altair or the charisma of Ezio. If the actions have no impact on the character, then it is simply of no value to the story. That sense of character originality is lost the moment you can choose who you play as, because now your character isn't part of a story, but it's part of your story. Though that would make sense and is good in a way for a game such as Assassin's Creed, which is supposed to have a memorable storyline in a world of its own, it just won't do, because that means different voice actors, and that would result in varying tones of emotions and dialogues expressed by them, and experiences will vary with different players based on their choice of selection, which is hardly a good thing when a game relies heavily on its plot and lore with regards to a specific character that ties into canon timelines. Furthermore, as we now know that you can switch the gender of the character mid-game as well, wouldn't that only be a cosmetic change and have no impact to the story or certain elements of the game in no manner at all? If they have given us a choice, then there should at least be some impact it has in the game and the story. At least in the case of Odyssey, the sibling relationship came through with the selection of the character choice. Even though it wasn't that impactful and was just some minor differences in the cutscenes, it had some sort of semblance and change within the game. Creative freedom is a handy tool. The extent one could go with it is phenomenal, and hopefully Valhalla can stay true to the period it is set in and respect the Norse culture and mythos. That being said, the real-world storyline of the series should also not be ignored. It has been limited to simply puzzle solving and parkouring from one point to another by the protagonist in this timeline. Time should also be taken to develop that character and the gameplay and story involved with her in the actual timeline, if it is being focused upon. There is no use of the real world storyline if they haven't worked past anything other than making it another puzzle solving experience. It shouldn't even be implemented if that is the case. We have already strayed far away from the Assassins vs Templars scenario, so what difference does it make? Well, at least it would simply help by not pulling the player away from an experience that could potentially be more entertaining, and as we've come to hear about the plot involving the Hidden Ones, which I suppose is how this will be linked to the Creed itself or maybe even the Templars, much more focus can be given to that part of the story. Another side note though, certain elements which have been explained in the comics should have actually been explained through the games themselves. Perhaps that was just another medium through which the company could profit, but if the story is relevant and adds value to the main characters, it should have been part of the game itself. Side quests have devolved into timed missions where you take part in delivering something from point A to point B and simply traversing the map. With trailing missions already being dumb and part of the game, the bar has been set pretty low. Side quests have even become mandatory to advance through in order to level your character so that you can meet the level requirements or move on with the main story. Side quests should not only be a fun way to divert yourself from the main story, but a tool to add depth to your character, the world, and its inhabitants. It's an important tool at that to make the world feel more alive. Instead of side quests being monotonous, repetitive, and a chore, they can be crafted into additional tales relevant to the time period and culture that the game is set in. Each piece of gear having its own lore, each raid having a grand purpose and uniqueness to it, loot that is actually tied to certain characters and not just lying in some god-forbidden trunk in a raid camp or a temple without any purpose other than inaccessibility behind it. Exposition through item descriptions or eavesdropping through conversations can also go a long way in making the world feel more alive. By incorporating meaningful and interesting characters and subplot lines that may even have a say in how the main story is propelled if branching pathways are involved, it could add more value to the game. Assuming raiding is a prevalent part of the game, then hopefully it has more value and depth to it than simply hunting for loot and increasing territory, because at the very core of Assassins was this belief to serve the truth and protect the freedom of the people, the very concept which seems to be lost as of late. It appears we have moved from spamming a tag button and filling up adrenaline for special moves to damage enemies to having implemented a stun meter and making parries and heavy strikes count. Hopefully gaining skill points to advance through the skill tree and gaining abilities isn't just a chore but is rewarded equally through side quests and exploration as well. The Hidden Blade seems to have made a comeback with the one-hit kills. It's a good thing, and it seems they have implemented a quick time mechanism while using the Hidden Blade, which can critically damage bosses as well. They've also added settlements, which is like a camp for you and your crew. Interesting to see how it will play out, but I do hope as an element in the game, it has an impact in the story that extends more than simply upgrading tools or gear. Say for example, it could even be used as a place where additional conversation for characters and news regarding world events can be revealed. It can make the world feel all the more real. An example of this would be the camps in Red Dead Redemption 2. Since there are dialogue choices that influence decisions and outcome of certain events in the game, these outcomes should have heavy payoffs or not just provide the player with a chance to redeem themselves by confronting the same outcome again. Every decision should matter in determining the ending, be it good or bad. Hopefully these branching paths are not trivial and actually have an impact, unlike Odyssey where the payoffs were not worth the time. As in the case of the hunt for the cultist in Odyssey, I mean seriously, all that killing and talk about revenge and you're gonna give the player the option to romance the leader of the cult. That just doesn't make sense. Focus should also be put into minigames that seem out of place. Stacking pebbles, that is where we have come to now sadly. In the world of Vikings, we are stacking pebbles and seeing how big we can stack them before they fall. From the gameplay that we were able to view, we also saw that there was a sequence where we chug alcohol. It could have at least been challenging with adding different button combinations, and then there's Viking rap battles. Surely that would be interesting. At least it's only a minor part of the game, but I get that these are supposed to be relaxing in a way and a way to divert ourselves from the tediousness of the main gameplay. Regardless, these don't matter when the core game isn't constructed properly. Why would I even care about a cat in a long ship that you can't even look at, let alone what practical purpose would it serve to the game? Cute things like these don't add value on their own and only matter when the rest of the game is already well constructed. Activities should aspire to be relevant to the setting of the world, and I hope that at least an attempt to do so is evident in Valhalla. No in-game purchases, and refining the game before launch. Does this really need to be stressed even now? XP gainers to get more XP in side missions so we can advance through the main missions, or some item to completely bypass that XP wall as well by spending some money? That just goes to show that the developers have no confidence in the product that they have delivered. They have no confidence in being interesting enough for players to actually play through it and not pay to complete it faster. Cosmetics as well should be changeable through in-game mechanics, through hunting, crafting and collecting in-game materials, not through spending money. Let the story guide you through the map, not grinding the same area over and over again to advance with your XP levels or even buying an XP pack to save time. When a person is spending $60 to buy a game, at least let them play the game without it being a broken mess. Even after years of development, the final product is oftentimes a fish that does not know how to swim. Not only does this break the confidence with the user base and the product, but it also shows the lack of care from the people pushing something that appears unfinished to release. So to conclude, as seen in the recent gameplay footage, the game still looks glitchy at parts. It lacks in visual quality in both gameplay and during dialogues, what Witcher 3 had managed to achieve way back in 2015. Facial expressions and animations seem underwhelming for a AAA company to deliver. Even the graphics, I suppose, is not very impressive considering Ghost of Tsushima was released and how beautiful that was. Competing with something as visually stunning and story driven as Ghost of Tsushima is surely a tough endeavor. The combat looks interesting with its finishers and assassinations being more useful this time. Do keep in mind that the views I've expressed is based on footage that is considered to still be under development, and with that being said, I think I've expressed my lack of belief with Assassin's Creed well enough at this point. Some of what I said may seem like nitpicking, but a game is a combination of a multitude of mechanisms where every element combines beautifully and masterfully to ensure an experience players would appreciate. In retrospect, since franchises like Watch Dogs, Far Cry and Assassin's Creed itself were crafted previously with a direction to get greenlit from Hascoed, it isn't far-fetched to assume this was also the reason that all open world and gameplay elements of these games and franchises have felt so similar and restricted. In order to appease Hascoed, him being the person who decided whether the game gets greenlit or not, as the same being evident in Bloomberg's article exposing the creative practices, this being the reason that compromised creative integrity and quality of the products that have been pushed out. Hopefully the changes that take place in the company does not promote the same kind of work environment and behavior as in the past. And I hope this doesn't discourage creators or rid them of the interest and creativity in working to make games that can continue to be innovative and fun as well. And that was my take, and thank you for watching my video, and until next time.
Ah, bueno, adiós, Master.